She was forced to use an old rifle and mocked for her appearance, but her single shot broke all the records. The wealthy shooters stood in shock as the simple woman they had ridiculed revealed her extraordinary talent with just one perfect bullseye. Before you watch full story, comment down your country name, I would love to hear. The prestigious Hawk's Eye shooting range was buzzing with activity as Sarah Miller walked through its doors, clutching her modest bag. The smell of gunpowder hung in the air as men in expensive tactical gear clustered around the lanes, their laughter echoing off the walls. Sarah adjusted her simple ponytail and straightened her unremarkable navy blue jacket. She had saved for months for this opportunity, just one day at the country's most elite shooting facility. "Excuse me," she said quietly, approaching the front desk. "I'd like to register for today's open practice session." The receptionist, a woman with sharp features and perfectly manicured nails, looked up with a practiced smile that faltered when she took in Sarah's appearance. No designer clothes, no expensive accessories, and certainly no custom firearms case. "The membership fee is $5,000 per year," the receptionist said dismissively, "plus a $200 daily range fee. We don't offer day passes to walk-ins." Her eyes flicked to Sarah's worn sneakers. Sarah placed 5 crisp $100 bills on the counter. "I'm aware of the daily fee for non-members. I'd just like to practice for a few hours." The receptionist's lips thinned as she reluctantly processed Sarah's payment. "Lane 13 is available. It's in the back corner." Of course, it was the least desirable spot, far from the center where the regular members practiced. As Sarah made her way to lane 13, she felt eyes tracking her movement. The range was filled with the city's elite: lawyers, doctors, businessmen, and even a few celebrities who took shooting as a prestigious hobby. Their gear alone was worth more than her yearly salary as a librarian. She set her bag down and took out her paperwork. She had applied for a special permit for today weeks ago. Sarah didn't own a gun. She had planned to rent one from the range. A burly man with a crew cut approached her station. His name tag read Rex Thornton, range manager. His eyes narrowed as he looked at her gear, or lack thereof. "Ma'am, where's your equipment?" he asked, his voice carrying just enough for the nearby shooters to hear. "I was hoping to rent a standard rifle for the session," Sarah replied. The website mentioned rental options. A few snickers came from the adjacent lanes. Rex didn't bother to hide his smirk. "Rentals are for people who know what they're doing," he said. "Have you ever even fired a gun before?" Sarah straightened her spine. "Yes, I have." "Let me see your stance," Rex challenged, crossing his arms. Sarah put down her bag and stood in perfect form. Anyone with trained eyes would recognize the precision of her posture, but Rex was looking for flaws. "Amateur," he scoffed. "You look like you learned that from YouTube." More laughter erupted around them. A group of men had stopped their practice to watch the interaction. "I just want to rent a rifle and practice," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. Rex sighed dramatically. "Fine. Wait here." He disappeared into a back room. The minutes stretched uncomfortably as Sarah stood there, feeling exposed under the curious and judgmental gazes of the other shooters. When Rex returned, he was carrying what looked like a relic from another era. A weathered bolt-action rifle with a scratched stock and worn metal. It was the kind of weapon used for basic training decades ago. "Here's what we have available for your skill level," Rex announced loud enough for everyone to hear. This old Remington was about to be decommissioned. "Consider yourself lucky we haven't thrown it out yet." Sarah accepted the rifle, examining it carefully. The scope was misaligned, the trigger mechanism stiff with age. She checked the barrel, at least that seemed clean. "The ammo will be $50 for a box," Rex added with a smirk. "Standard rate." It was at least twice the normal price, but Sarah nodded and handed over more of her carefully saved money. "Don't hurt yourself," Rex said as he walked away, generating another round of chuckles from the nearby lanes. Sarah took a deep breath and began to set up. She carefully placed her targets, standard paper ones, not the fancy electronic targets the other lanes used. The old rifle felt awkward in her hands, nothing like what she was used to. But she had come too far to back down now. She loaded the rifle methodically, each movement precise despite the unfamiliar weapon. When she lifted it to take aim, she heard more snickering. "Look at that form," a man in an expensive shooting jacket commented to his companion. "She's going to miss the entire target board." $10 says she doesn't even hit the paper," his friend replied. Sarah blocked out their voices and focused. The rifle was heavier than she expected, the scope badly calibrated. She would need to adjust for that. She took a deep breath, exhaled slowly and pulled the trigger. The shot went wide, missing the target entirely. Laughter erupted behind her. "Told you," someone called out. Sarah remained calm. She had expected this. The rifle needed calibration and she needed to get a feel for its quirks. She adjusted her stance slightly, recalculated her aim, and fired again. The shot hit the outer ring of the target. Better but not good enough. "At this rate, she'll hit the bullseye sometime next week," another shooter joked. By now, a small crowd had gathered to watch the spectacle. Nothing entertained the regulars more than a novice embarrassing themselves. Sarah ignored them all, focusing entirely on the task at hand. Shot after shot, she made minute adjustments. By her fifth attempt, she was consistently hitting the target, though still far from the center. The laughter had died down somewhat, replaced by casual dismissal. "Beginner's luck," someone muttered. "She'll tire out soon." But Sarah didn't tire. Instead, she seemed to grow more focused, more determined with each shot. What the onlookers couldn't know, was that Sarah Miller wasn't just any woman who had wandered into the wrong place. After her 15th shot, which landed reasonably close to the bullseye, Rex returned to her lane. "Time's almost up," he said, checking his watch. "We have members waiting for this lane." Sarah nodded. "One more shot, please." Rex rolled his eyes but stepped back. "Make it quick." Sarah reloaded the rifle one last time. The crowd had mostly dispersed, having lost interest in her mediocre performance. Only a few remained, probably waiting to claim her lane. For this final shot, Sarah closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had changed in her demeanor. She adjusted her position slightly, held the rifle differently. Those with a trained eye might have noticed that her stance was now flawless, her grip expert, her breathing controlled in a rhythm that professional shooters develop over years of practice. She fired. The sound echoed through the range, and for a moment, everything went quiet. Because this final shot from the old, supposedly worthless rifle, had hit dead center of the bullseye. Not just the bullseye but the absolute center, a shot so perfect it seemed impossible, especially from that distance and with that equipment. "Lucky shot," Rex said after a moment, but his voice lacked conviction. Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she calmly began packing up her things. One of the observers, an older man with gray hair and a military bearing, stepped forward to examine her target. His eyebrows shot up. "That's a competition-level shot," he said, turning to look at Sarah with new interest. "Who are you?" Before Sarah could answer, the doors to the range burst open. A tall, distinguished-looking man in an impeccable suit strode in, flanked by two assistants. The entire range fell silent as Marcus Reynolds, Olympic gold medalist and current national shooting champion, walked directly toward lane 13. "Sarah Miller?" he called out, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent room. Sarah turned, nodding calmly. "Yes, Mr. Reynolds?" Marcus approached, extending his hand. "I apologize for being late. Traffic was terrible. I see you've already started without me." The confusion on everyone's faces was palpable. Rex stepped forward, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. "You know each other?" he asked. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Of course. Sarah was my instructor at the Olympic training facility. Best marksman I've ever met." He turned to Sarah. "Did you tell them about your 3 Olympic golds and the world record you still hold?" Sarah shook her head, a small smile finally breaking through her composed exterior. "It didn't come up." "Wait," said the older man who had noticed her shot. "You're that Sarah Miller? The one they called silent scope in the military." By now, a crowd had reformed around lane 13, but the atmosphere had completely transformed. Gone were the snickers and dismissive glances, replaced by shocked stares and whispered conversations. Rex had gone pale. "But, the rifle I gave you was a deliberate challenge, I assume?" Sarah finished for him, her voice mild. "It's all right. I've fired worse in the field." Marcus examined the old rifle and chuckled. "You used this to make that shot? That's going on social media." He gestured to one of his assistants who was already taking photos of the target. "Why didn't you say something?" Rex asked, his voice strained. Sarah replaced the old rifle on the counter. "Would you have believed me?" The truth was, Sarah Miller had retired from professional shooting 5 years ago after a distinguished military career and multiple Olympic victories. She now worked as a specialized instructor, training elite shooters like Marcus Reynolds. She had come to Hawk's Eye not to impress anyone or prove anything, but simply to evaluate the facility for potential training sessions. What no one in the range knew was that her perfect shot hadn't just been impressive. It had actually broken the standing record for precision with a standard bolt-action rifle, a feat made all the more remarkable by the poor quality of the equipment she had been forced to use. "We would be honored if you would consider using our facility for your training programs," Rex said, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. Sarah picked up her modest bag. "I'll think about it. You might want to reconsider your rental options though. Not everyone who looks like a beginner is one." She turned to Marcus. "Shall we discuss your training schedule over lunch? I noticed some issues with your last competition that we should address." As they walked out together, the entire range watched in stunned silence. The woman they had mocked and dismissed had turned out to be a legend in the shooting world, and she had just demonstrated mastery beyond anything they had ever witnessed, with the very equipment they had given her as an insult. The next day, the old rifle was placed in a display case at the entrance of Hawk's Eye Shooting Range, with a plaque that read, "Used by Sarah Silent Scope Miller to break the national precision record." And beneath it, in smaller letters, "Never judge a shooter by their appearance." Registration at Hawk's Eye tripled in the following month, with many new members being women who had heard the story of what happened that day. And Lane 13, once the least desirable spot in the range, became the most requested lane, with shooters hoping that some of Sarah Miller's extraordinary skill might somehow rub off on them. As for Sarah herself, she did eventually return to the range, this time as the head instructor of their new elite training program, where her first lesson always began with the same words: "The quality of the shooter is never determined by appearances but by results."